Hello, everyone. This is the December 18th Frontline update for the Russo-Ukrainian war. However, it'll probably be the 19th before you guys see this video, so there might be some updates that we don't go over that happen on that day or on tomorrow. So, the last several months have seen a steadily degrading frontline situation as the Ukrainian army has been coping with the new realities of a failed offensive, a lack of Western aid, and a severe shortage of trained manpower and equipment. Just west of Bakhmut, Russia has just captured the 506 road crossing, and Ukrainian forces appear to be withdrawing from Kyiv, two positions that Ukraine previously boasted as a great success when they were recaptured by their forces. Meanwhile, north of Bakhmut, Russian troops have retaken lost ground and are now advancing on Seversk, which has been relatively safe from Russian assaults over the course of 2023 until now. In Bakhmut, or rather, I guess, in Avdiivka, street fighting has begun in the southern parts of the city, and Ukrainian forces are systematically being forced back from the railroad on the northern flank. So there's a lot of updates both in Bakhmut and Avdiivka. Two additional battles are being carried out that stress Ukraine both in the far north and far south of the Donbass section of the front line. One of those is competing with the Bakhmut direction for the most frontline updates, and I'm sure you already can guess that that's the Marinka Nova Mykhailivka direction, where we have a ton of updates. The Kyiv government, on top of that, is also riddled with internal problems. So let's take a quick dive into all that and the state of the current war. Before we begin, just a quick reminder to consider hitting both the like and subscribe button. Great ways to help grow the channel if you prefer this independent open source reporting. Check out the links in the description for our sponsors and if you are looking to support the channel. Also consider following New World Geopolitics on both Twitter and Telegram if you want to dive deeper on our sources and engage in conversation about the war. The front lines are engulfed in heavy Russian artillery at the moment. These relentless barrages accompanied by Russian assaults and snowfall are creating a miserable situation for the troops on the front lines. Once again, we have another 5-day period that has seen more rapid advances than at any other point in the war this year. So it seems that every 5 days or so, we're getting bigger and bigger changes in the front line, even compared to the Russian advance on Bakhmut in the beginning of the year, and definitely compared to the Ukrainian summer offensive. So we will get into that briefly, but first we are going to cover the state of things going on in Kyiv. There's a lot to talk about here. Lately, there's been a flurry of reports about discontent among different powerful factions in Ukraine's capital. This has led to a great deal of speculation about power struggle within Ukraine, where some believe that President Zelensky is at odds with his top military commander and primary political rival, Valery Zaluzhny. And that story has taken on many different forms. And there's quite a bit of speculation there. So I think perhaps there's a deeper question about the possibility of a coup d'etat, which I probably should cover eventually. I'm going to do that in another video because I could talk on that topic for a whole 10 minutes all on its own. And I don't think we really have time for that. But there's undoubtedly a lot of other things to talk about and things that are going on behind the scenes in Kyiv since the failure of the summer offensive, including claims that Zelensky attempted to sack Zaluzhny from his position with an apparent refusal from Zaluzhny to leave his post. While there's no evidence to support this, there are several other events to consider. Firstly, there was a viral and very distressing video that emerged of a Ukrainian parliamentarian from President Zelensky's party that set off several grenades during a council meeting that wounded 26 people and killed 1. An event that was captured on live stream and probably one of the most shocking videos I have seen in a long time. At the moment, the prevailing opinion as to the motive of this attack is that the official who served in the Ukrainian army has a severe case of PTSD and battlefield shock. This, accompanied with a disagreement over the subject of the meeting, pushed the man to make a horrible decision. Nevertheless, it paints a very bad view of politics in the Ukrainian capital to those of us in the Western world. The next big development is a story that a listening device was discovered in Zaluzhny's office after a routine bug sweep. There is, of course, a great deal of speculation about who planted the device. Many are assuming that the Russian intelligence is behind the bug. Of course, Ukraine is at war with Russia, and Russia would certainly not miss out on an opportunity to listen in on the commander's conversations. There is, however, an alternative claim that the device was placed in the office by people loyal to President Zelensky himself, done in an effort to spy on his rival out of fears of a coup d'etat. There is a clear bias to this story in mainstream news coverage, with those outlets claiming the bug to be not foreign intelligence but Ukrainian palace intrigue belonging to Russian state-affiliated news agencies, and the outlets claiming Russia is the main culprit being from large media conglomerates located in Western countries supportive of Ukraine. Of course, this does not say for sure what happened, but it gives us a glimpse into the biases of media. I am looking at this story of the Zaluzhny bug on Ground News, an app and website that provides data and insights that mainstream news often tries to hide, and it makes it easier for me to get all the sides of the story in one central place. I do not often have sponsors on this channel, but I'm happy to partner with Ground News because it is a service that I myself use every day, even before they sponsored this channel, and frankly, before I even had a channel. Looking at this bug story, we can see that 63 sources have been covering this story, and 76% of those sources are on the center and right, likely because it paints a bleak picture of the struggles inside of the Ukrainian capital, a topic that left-wing media has consistently failed to cover. When looking closer, you can see the distinct narratives forming based on the political bias of the source articles. I also have access to other tools such as a factuality matrix that shows which sources are more trustworthy and which are not, an ownership matrix that shows the money behind the articles, and then a map that shows where the source articles are coming from, distributed by country. To gain access to these features, go to ground.news/NWG and subscribe through my link for 40% off unlimited access with the Vantage subscription, or for just $1 a month. That's ground.news/NWG for a better way to read the news. Thank you once again to Ground News for sponsoring this channel and helping us conduct reliable open source reporting. Moving on to the updates coming from the front lines, we are going to start in the Bakhmut sector, which has seen the largest changes. As stated in my previous videos, it is my belief that during the hard battles around Avdiivka in October and November, Ukrainian command was forced to pull resources from other sections of the front in order to reinforce the city. One of those main sectors that saw a reduction in Ukrainian troop concentration appears to be Bakhmut. Russia has exploited that reality and has temporarily shifted its main axis of attack to this direction. To the northwest of the city, the Russian forces have advanced further on the town of Bogdanovka, pushing Ukraine back on both of the town's northern flanks. It appears that the next step for the Russians will be to finish capturing this tree line to the northwest side of town so Russian forces can begin entering into the village. Southeast of this position, Ukraine was forced to retreat further down the rail line. This is I believe, the furthest extent that Russian forces had originally made it down this direction of attack during the battles of the spring for Bakhmut. And then, of course, on the 0506 road, the Russians actually managed to cross and capture this intersection here, something that it appears they never were quite able to do earlier in the spring. So this is quite an achievement for the Russian forces in this area. This also is the top of the hill. As you can see, it's the crest of the hill. And I had mentioned in my last video, by capturing this position, it will allow Russian forces to advance directly on Ivanovka, and that appears to already be happening. The Russians have taken over this racetrack. It's a car racetrack, perhaps even a dirt bike racetrack, and have captured the northwestern side of the lake. Further to the south of that, the Russians have advanced into the dachas, which are technically not exactly sure if they're within the city limits of Bakhmut itself. I think Ukraine holding on to this little section of town is the one little bit of, um, I guess you could say, legitimacy behind the claim that they never lost the Battle of Bakhmut, because they still held on to this small sliver down here at the southern edge of town. The Russians have now completely captured all of that and have advanced all the way to the end of it and are pushing rapidly on the town of Ivanovka. Further to the south of that, the word from Kyiv, after Russia captured this area of fortifications overlooking the town, they cut off the communication lines between Kyiv and Ivanovka, and the sources that we follow that are closest to information coming directly from the battlefield are claiming that Ukraine is conducting a fighting withdrawal from Kyiv. So I would not be surprised if we saw information in the next couple days that Kyiv has completely fallen back into Russian hands. Unfortunately, that will be a very large blow for the Ukrainian military. This was seen as one of their final victories over the summer, and is now rapidly being reversed. All right, moving on to Avdiivka itself. There's some other updates around the front that we're not going to have time to get to, but we're going to talk about the biggest things. Avdiivka itself, on the northern side of town, the Russians have continued to advance further up the rail line. They have also advanced and captured tree lines and trenches both to the north and south of Stepove. So this threatens, of course, the entire northern Ukrainian flank here. If Stepove falls and then Berdichi becomes the next battlefield, that's going to stress communications and the continuous line between Novo Kalinove and Karamik all the way around to the coke plant. Also, not good that Russian troops are advancing on Oxcherny, which is probably where most of the reinforcements for the sector arrive at. There's a rail station and a rail line that comes up to here. I doubt that that's actually being used. The Ukrainians probably use something further to the west, like Sergeyevka, perhaps even this town here of Novo Grodivka, in order to disembark their troops, just to drive or hitchhike the rest of the way, rather than pulling trains all the way up to Oxcherny, which is surely within artillery range of the Russians by this point. So heavy Russian bombardment has been going on this front for the last week or so. There's rumors of Russian advances in several different places. There's some sources like Rybar that claim that Russians are advancing south of Kamyanka. I haven't really had any confirmation of that. In some of these are less trustworthy sources. However, we do have information that Russia has began the street-to-street fighting of Avdiivka itself, advancing beyond the industrial zone and the quarry in the southern parts of town and entering into the first streets of the city. Further to the west, on the southern flank of Avdiivka, the Russians are also pushing on Pervomaysk. Heavy artillery bombardment going on in this area, and a flanking maneuver trying to outflank the town. If this ends up picking up steam, it will collapse essentially this entire position. However, I am skeptical that well, I say that, but the Russians have been moving a lot quicker than I assumed they would be able to. But I'm skeptical that a continued assault in this direction would be wise for the Russians, because it opens them up to counter. This is a pretty exposed position, and it opens them up to counterattack from multiple different directions. So, we'll see about what's going on here in this area over the next couple weeks. This seems to me like one of the few areas that Ukraine might stand a chance of counterattacking, like maybe a counterattack towards Vadian could relieve the stress in the southern part of the town and force Russians to step back a little bit from Severne as well, because that would leave them in a rather exposed position. But we'll see about that in the coming weeks. So moving on to the Marinka Nova Mykhailivka front, this is competing with the Bakhmut front in terms of the most advances. So just real quick, zooming out, as you can see, if you're on an iPhone, it's going to be a little tougher to see, but you can see that there's these lighter red blotches all over the map. There's basically three main directions of assault Bakhmut, Avdiivka, and then Marinka, with Bakhmut and Marinka being the two primary at the moment. So, initially Avdiivka was that assault. Ukrainian troops were brought in from all different kinds of parts of the front in order to defend that, and then Russia decided to go around and attack other places. So in Marinka, the Russians have moved up and captured another section of the northern part of the town. There's just one more street to capture before this entire part of the city of Marinka is now under Russian control. Some sources are claiming that Russia has already taken control over all of these farmhouses and these tree lines perhaps in this area, but I don't really have any evidence of that just yet. But currently we know that the Ukrainian forces are still battling over this final row of houses and perhaps these two intersections right here. In Marinka itself, we have finally a second, or I guess it's now a third, geolocation of a Russian flag in a house. That house is actually right here. It's in the video and the pictures you see, it's pretty destroyed, but this is actually the house. It's on the far eastern corner of Kashtanova Street. So that confirms that the entirety of the central part of Ukraine is now under Russian control. Ukrainian troops have also retreated from the forests and the road on the western side of the industrial area. So overall, looking at Marinka, it is now 99% under Russian control, with just this final street in the north holding out for the Ukrainians. Now, part of the same battle, but with a different objective, a different city in mind. Further to the south here, there's quite a bit of updates for Mykhailivka as well. Firstly, in the direction coming from Marinka, we had previously marked this under Russian control. It doesn't appear like that was the case because there's video of Ukrainian forces being assaulted by Russian tanks and Russian drones in this dugout, this elevated dugout here. This position was captured by Russian forces, marking their advance down this 532 road towards Pobeda. On top of that, the Russians have also taken control of this forest plantation here, some more of these raised dugouts, and some more of these tree lines, bypassing a series of Ukrainian fortifications that are allegedly in this northeastern corner of the fields, covering the northern approach from Mykhailivka. So the Russians now rapidly advancing south on Mykhailivka. For Mykhailivka itself, the Russians have made quite a few advances. Last week, we discussed there was footage of destroyed Russian vehicles at this intersection on the eastern side of town. Now we have word that the Russians have now captured this intersection at the southern part of town, next to this small industrial or warehouse district, as well as capturing this area here, which I believe is a cemetery. So the Russians are poised to jump directly into the center of Mykhailivka. So that's it for the main updates. We're at 18.5 minutes. I'll go ahead and talk real quick about Seversk. There's a number of updates here in Seversk as well, along with a continued advance down this rail line here that's directly to the east of Vassel. There's been pretty consistent advances here by the Russians over the last couple months. There's two areas, Sako, Seti, and Mykhailivka, where the Russians are also advancing, taking over Ukrainian trench lines that are protecting the towns of Fedorovka and Rozdelivka. In the case of Rozdelivka, a new trench line, which kind of tells me that this map has been updated, not in 2023, but perhaps in 2022. You could see here a new trench line that's down through these trees and across these roads. This was taken over by Russian forces and is now working for the Russians against the Ukrainians. So the Russians also poised to jump into those two towns as well. So overall picture of the front, Russian forces are making these three primary advances, methodical advances on Ukrainian entrenchments that were previously considered extremely strong positions, that being Marinka, Mykhailivka, Avdiivka, and then the fortifications directly to the west of Bakhmut. The Ukrainians so far have not found a way to slow the Russians over the last 2 months. Half a dozen more secondary advances are also taking place in some areas that we didn't even have a chance to cover. So keep a lookout for the next video update. The frequency of my reports will increase while the front is at this level of flux. Don't forget to check out our sponsors and visit the New World Geopolitics Telegram and Twitter for more information. That's all from me in this one. Until next time.